Hej och välkomna. Jag heter Tove Dumont Wallsten och jag är här från Sveriges arkitekter. Med mig här är Johannes Tovatt och vi är här med anledning av Erskine-stipendiet som delades ut igår på Arkitekturgalan. Stipendiet gick till Assemble Studio som igår höll en kort presentation av sitt arbete på Arkitekturgalan. Och idag så ska de fördjupa den. Och vi är glada att i och med detta också inleda vår serie av jubileumsföreläsningar. Jubileumsföreläsningarna kommer hållas under hela 2022. Ett jubileumsår för Sveriges arkitekter. De streamas på arkitekt.se och de går även att se i efterhand. Och det här är den första. Den gör vi i samarbete med Erskine-stiftelsen och med Sweco Architects, hos vilka vi är idag. Jag lämnar ordet till Johannes Tovatt, ordförande i stiftelsen, eller styrelsen för Erskine-stiftelsen. Tack så mycket för att vi får här tillsammans med er idag.
Tack ska du ha. Ja, jag tänkte I'll start in Swedish. So you just follow the stream. You're quite used to it right now, so you can relax. Erskine-stiftelsen. Det är en stiftelse som Ralph Erskine instiftade i slutet av 80-talet. Och här finns med i salen finns en del av styrelsens medlemmar. Vi har Mark Isitt här. Som kommer att avsluta den här sändningen och föreläsningen med att hålla ihop lite frågor. Vi har också Matilda Crisp här och Dick Sandberg. Sen har vi egentligen inga fler styrelsemedlemmar, men i styrelsen finns också Gert Wingård och Helle Juhl och Charlotte Hubinett, Carolina Wikström och Johanna Brattel. Jag var lite kort om Erskine. Många av er känner ju till honom som namn och ni har sett många av hans byggnader. Och ute i världen så finns det stadsplaner och stora projekt från mitten av 1900-talet fram till tidigt 2000. Och här i salen finns flera före detta medarbetare till Erskine också. Från mitt gamla team, David Neuschütz här och såklart Matilda Crisp. Och han var ju en väldigt färgstark och speciell person i svensk arkitekturhistoria. Han gjorde till igår till galan så sammanfattade lite grann på engelska här att jag tar det på engelska, again. Att Ralph Erskine evolved from one of the second generation leader of the modern movement to an architect deeply engaged in the social consequences following the changing nature of human habitats. Och det är liksom mycket vad det egentligen handlar om. Att han föddes in i the modern movement och bröt med ganska grundläggande delar av den moderna rörelsen, om vi säger så. Och stod de mänskliga behoven väldigt, väldigt nära. Och han sökte humor och djup i både arkitektur och stadsbyggandet, i byggnader och stadsplaner. Och när han sen fick ett stort pris själv, han fick väldigt många utmärkelser och pris under åren. Och instiftade sen ett eget pris, The Erskine Award. Som ungefär var tredje år delar ut ett stipendium om $10,000 till unga arkitekter i början av sin yrkesbana, men som har byggt någonting som är realiserat. Och det är därför vi har våra kära pristagare här idag. Assemble Studio. Och det som är så speciellt med årets pristagare, you follow me, right? You understand what I'm saying, är att det här är en grupp människor som i början av sin yrkesbana försöker att hitta bakomliggande nya, egentligen krafter i arkitekturyrket, tycker vi i styrelsen. Hitta mönster, spår, inspiration och dialog kring projekt och människor som egentligen kan sammanfattas, jag tycker ni sammanfattar det så fint med opportunities. A project is an opportunity. We don't know the answer at all. We don't know the people, but you get to know the people and you live in your project. You live through and in your project, and that's what's so amazing and so beautiful and so inspiring, not only for the young generation to come, but for the future and us slightly older. So, thank you very much for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll just quickly introduce all of us. This is Louis. This is Shay. This is Emily, and I'm Owen. We're from Assemble in London. And I thought I'd start off today, before going back about projects that we have done, I thought I'd jump into Assemble today and kind of how we, as an organisation, are structured and kind of what we do day to day. So I'll take you straight into this interesting slide. So this is made by one of our Part 1s, Ergul, who is currently studying Assemble. So he's made this diagram of the kind of how Assemble works and its intricacies. So within this kind of pale pink bigger blob here is kind of where all the partners in Assemble sit. And the partners are all kind of, there's 15 founding partners, and outside of it, you also have, so that in the bottom you have Part 1s and Part 2s, and inside is kind of all the different management structures of like new work, management, estates, and I'm in the middle, and it's kind of how everyone kind of bleeds into each other. But yeah, so Assemble kind of has set up into two main businesses. One is Assemble Design, which is what we use for all of our like design and architecture work, but also we have Assemble Workspace, which is we are a workspace provider for designers, fabricators and artists, and we build and manage our workspaces, and just to kind of try and support builders and designers. So we have three spaces. One of them, which is Assemble are in at the moment, is called Sugarhouse Studios, which is where Assemble operates from. And this is the second iteration of Sugarhouse Studios. I'll talk more in a bit about Sugarhouse 1 in a minute. And we have Fabric Floor, which is a fashion and textiles studio based in Brixton at London. And we also have Dome Yard, which is one we've just opened in North Greenwich, which is based over 2 buildings. One is for large-scale fabrication, and another one is for music and producers. So Sugarhouse 1 was originally set up in 2011 and closed in 2016. And it started off for Assemble's first project, Cineroleum, was just a group of students and people volunteering to build, it was a self-initiated program to transform an old petrol station into a cinema. And we did it through lots of experimentation and lots of people kind of self-building. So we built it ourselves, designed it, there was lots of volunteers helping to build, and then once it was built, we also ran it, had a bar there, and it was completely self-initiated and self-run. And it was that DIY kind of mentality that kind of we wanted to bring into our first workspace. So originally we wanted to find a space to move the cinema into. So we found this space in Stratford, and at the time in 2012 when we kind of moved in, there was the Olympic regeneration happening, so there was some money around from the Olympics. And we wanted to have a workshop, but we had no kind of tools, so we've partnered up with Workshop East, who are an amazing group of carpenters and builders, and they moved into the space, and in order for them to move in, they let us use their tools. And ever since then, so this is Sugarhouse 1, we've now moved to Sugarhouse 2, they've moved with us, and some more of the kind of people that are there as well. So this was kind of the beginning of our community that we built. So Sugarhouse sought to find space for research, design, and construction. So for this building, it was focused on exploiting the assets of the existing light industrial shed and making light touches and kind of inexpensive adjustments to develop it to what we needed it for. And when we occupied the space, we ran a variety of small ventures such as a cafe, pizzeria that operated through 2012, and a season of arts, cinema, construction workshops with local school children, and some exhibitions and some late night events. And there's our sign that we had for our pizza. Assemble has also always been based at Sugarhouse, so our offices were based there, and it was where we operated from, and it's where we worked from and worked with the people inside of the community that we built there as well. And when we were there, in 2012, we developed and built Yard House, which is an affordable workspace building that Assemble built next to Sugarhouse in Stratford. And it was dismantled when we moved from Sugarhouse 1 to Sugarhouse 2, and it's yet to be built, so it's still kind of in pieces. But the front facade facing out into the yard was made from these colourful concrete tiles that we handmade on site. And it was constructed and designed by Assemble, so we completed it all ourselves. This is us kind of installing the facade. And the actual main structure was a barn-like timber frame that was enclosed by prefabbed insulated panels. And it was kind of a very cheap way to kind of build quite an economical large workspace. And the building's aim was to create this kind of sociable and collaborative work environment where the studios were provided with no kind of partitions, but tenants were free to kind of build walls as they wanted to fit the space, and it's kind of a modular working space that they could kind of make into their own. So here's kind of when some people moved in and there's a few of the walls built. So then after we left there, demolished Yard House, moved to Bermondsey for Sugarhouse 2, which is where we're currently based. And it was it was a former site of a school, which is due to be demolished next year. And it's going to be made way for a large developer-led housing scheme. So this is kind of kind of an overview of how it works. But we've used the building, and we kind of use it to provide workspace for artists and designers, and kind of have brought some of the, as I said before, brought some of the designers from the old space into the new one. So here's kind of an overview of the studio. So we have around 20 studios in total, which includes spaces occupied by furniture makers, woodworkers, metalworkers, graphic designers, sound designers, record labels, and music studios, alongside our artists, architects, ceramicists, and designers. So there's a real mix of people in our studios. So one of the main things that we have in the studio is this kind of large front-of-house space which people can rent out. And there's lots of communal spaces. We have a communal courtyard, there's a communal kitchen, and there's there's also a communal woodworking space called the Mill, which people can use for free. So anyone who's in the studios has access to all these things for free. And then here's a shot of some of the woodworkers in the studio. And also we have classes that are run there in the evening classes, and this is a shot of our ceramics studio with a kiln also there that people can use if they want this to book in to use it. And then also our music studios. So in the iterations of both Stratford and Bermondsey, Sugarhouse has been used for the development, construction and assembly of numerous projects in the local area and further afield. So I'll talk you through one quickly, which is a project which we recently finished in Bermondsey, just around the corner from us, called The Blue. So Assemble works in really close collaboration with lots of people from Sugarhouse Studios. So one was Hayatsu Architects, who are above us, upstairs in Sugarhouse, also Stinson Squeeze, a graphic designer. And it was a series of careful interventions that aimed to revitalise The Blue and kind of bring it back to its historic market glory, almost. So The Blue has a long, long history as a market. During its heyday in the 19th century, it was said that you could get anything at The Blue, and it had around 200 stalls. But with the decline of local industry and the closure of the Surrey docks, alongside kind of many other issues, and it kind of got disconnected from the wider area, and so it needed a redevelopment, and the redevelopment was spearheaded by the local community, aimed to revive it and restore its place in the local landscape. So we worked with the local. So this is before we kind of came along, and then afterwards you can kind of see. Looks quite nice. And so yeah, this is a shot of it being opened by the mayor, and we ran lots of local workshops with the community. Worked in very close contact with all of the stall holders and kind of everyone in the area. And so this kind of a structure on the left here was like a tin can structure that Takeshi made, and he ran workshops with people to kind of engrave them and before installing them. And it's been overhauled with kind of an introduction of lots of new civic structures, bespoke furniture, which was made in the Sugarhouse Studios, and reinvigorated planting and paving, and all the other improvements which enriched what was already there. So here's a few of here's the clock tower that Takeshi built, These benches were made by some of the woodworkers in the studios. The signage was made by Stinson Squeeze, a graphic designer inside of the studios also. And here's also another assemble project, which we're going to talk more about later, Granby, who also installed this fountain in the square as well. But yeah, I'll pass you on now.
I'll come next. Hello. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking to you about a project that, again, a recent project that's still going on at the moment. Let me go back to this slide. House of Annette, which is based at 25 Princelet Street, which is an extraordinary semi-derelict 5-story Huguenot townhouse in Spitalfields, basically East London. And we were approached basically by the Edith Marion Foundation, and they're an organisation based in Switzerland, who were set up to remove land and property from the flow of inheritance and speculation. They have a numerous amount of projects in Germany, Switzerland, Netherlands, I think Belgium as well, but they have never had property in the UK. Most of their properties are usually gifted by families who don't want to give it to developers because they feel like they're going to destroy the property and turn it into something that is not in line with the family's kind of beliefs, and they would rather let them have it and continue like a cultural or social approach. So coming to us after they had seen our work done in Liverpool, which Emily will talk to you a bit more about that after me. We were given the keys to this house in 2019. And this is the state of the house when we first moved in. The garden was fully overgrown, and inside the house was full of belongings. You could barely see the floors. Every room was just abundance of stuff. So our first job was to clear it. And as you can see, it's a beautiful interior, and it kind of feels like you're walking back into time, like into an amazing film set as you go through the building. So we soon discovered a rich archive of items. These weren't rubbish. There were actually lots of belongings of a lovely, amazing woman called Annette Progetti. I'm going to see if this, let's see if it actually plays. I don't think it will, so I'll just leave that. So yeah, the house was owned by Annette Progetti, who passed away in 2018, and she left no wills. So when her family inherited the building, they decided to give it to the Swiss Foundation, Edith Marion. And let me go to the next page. For the past 40 years, the house has been home to Annette Progetti, a Swiss polymath. So she was a cybernetician who used the space to develop a huge range of theoretical, architectural and artistic projects. She first came to the UK in London to study architecture at the AA School of Architecture, but then went into doing multiple things. I think she became friends with a lot of the other architects who'd fell in love with this area and wanted to preserve and restore the buildings on the street. So in the house, she did many amazing things, such as start her own publishing press called the Princelet Editions, where she was printing cybernetic material in these small, lovely A5 format books. She also developed amazing, quite a unique beekeeping system based on cybernetic ideas. You can see the honey there and the beehive just next to me in that photo. She also was an amazing seamstress and was designing these amazing clothes with lots of feminist quotes running all over it. And she also held loads of workshops in Spitalfield Market, which was just across the street. In 1993, she sewed some flags that would represent multiculturalism and no-nation ideas, and so forth. So here's some more of the collection of the work stuff she had. She also had loads of footage of the local area, and was a very engaged member of the local neighbourhood, filming many hours of footage around the market. Committed campaigner trying to save large development proposals that were threatening the local community. Also the big Crossrail, which is about to open soon, actually, in London as well. And she also did a lot of construction in the house, redoing a lot of the windows, the staircases, spindling the new the stair threads and everything, redoing the new doors and replacing the mantelpieces. So just a bit about the area. As you can see in the green circle, that's where the house is. This map basically in red shows where the wealthier kind of houses were at the time in the 18th century. And the dark black houses are the poorest houses in the area at the time. So you can see that the house we were in was at the time a very, located in a very like poor area. The area was basically kind of transformed and was affected a lot by a lot of the wholesale market trade. So for until the 90s, it wasn't a very appealing place to be because of the amount of cars coming through the area and the constant flow of like rubbish. And also generally when the Huguenots came in the 18th century, they brought a big flux of textile industry, which were continued by the Jewish community and then following the Muslim community who came and continued the culture of weaving and textiles in the area. But due to lack of development and funding, there became the rising in land value went up and small businesses became really difficult to sustain in the area. So with that in mind, and just giving the context of the area, and also whilst we did some research looking at a lot of other spaces that were big activist spaces in London, we proposed to the foundation that we would develop a social centre that basically helped support people working within housing rights and land reform. And because of the context and the space of Brick Lane, which is changing so dramatically in the last decade, it felt very suitable to have a space like that support both grassroots organisations trying to fight and save cultural buildings, markets, community centres, venues, as well as organisations who are trying to fight against the intersectionality of inequality compounded by the property system. So some of the main key points we were looking at was to maintain some of this, some sense of enchantment of the building in its current state, to keep and continue some of Annette's work, acknowledging her life and commitment to the building as part of its history, and also, where possible, to use ecologically sensitive and recycled materials. And then also to make the building fully accessible, and to do this, we would think about trying to raise a lot of capital because it's a very expensive project. As you can see, here are some more pictures of the current state of the building. Some of the threads, like the last floor, you have to go up a ladder, which is always fun when we're showing people around. They're like, is it safe? And we're like, yeah, we've got insurance, it's fine. You can see you can see some of the traditional ways of lining the insulation between the walls, thinking about how we can take a modern approach to retaining this kind of method. There's something we're going to be developing in our planning application in the next year. So we've been working in in residence in the house in quite an ad hoc way. The first term we were in the freezing cold. There was no insulation really in the house, just working with a computer and a laptop, just trying to be on site was a very important part of the project, because in order to build relationships with the people who would potentially be the building owners, we had to be there. This project would not be possible if we weren't there. It's not feasible at all. Through that, we became to meet the local community, local organisations, such as the Spitalfield Trust, who are involved in trying to support the Save Brick Lane campaign. So they got in touch with us and wanted to do an exhibition in the house, trying to acknowledge the local history and to stop the Truman Brewery, which is just up the road from the house, to stop it being turned into a commercial shopping centre and to make it something more sensible and more appropriate for small businesses. So here you can see a lot of campaigns in there. And also, last summer, we also wanted to get involved with lots of female trades and crafts people. Because of Annette's history of craft, we wanted to celebrate female plumbers, only female electricians, and female carpenters to get involved in redoing the building, and also do workshops with other women and non-binary people to upskill them. And in the garden, we teamed up with Land in Our Names, a grassroots black-led collective committed to reparations in Britain by connecting land and climate justice with racial justice. And they set up a series of programs such as beekeeping, rewilding the back garden, and just doing a lot of nature projects inside there. So it was all about activating the space, getting people invited into the space, getting to understand the space, and through that, having conversations about what the space could materialize in the future, who could be, would it be a space for activities, workshops, office space, and so forth. And also exhibitions with other architecture students from the Westminster School of Architecture who did a study of the whole house, and also knowledge building workshops, thinking about how we could transform the space and thinking about the legacy of the future of the building use and so forth. So this is like a kind of current state of it right now, a bit of development, but there's a long way to go. And then finally, we've been setting up a charity for the project itself, which will hopefully run similar to the Edith Marion Foundation, to also hold property, take it out of speculation, and also hopefully in the future create more projects similar to House of Annette that could be for community use and social projects. Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Emily, who is going to talk about Liverpool. No, you got one. Here you go. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to talk about Liverpool, which is, it's a place where we've been working. We've got lots of projects that have happened in this area, and that are still happening, basically. And it's an area called Granby. And Granby is one of the oldest black communities in the UK. The growth of Liverpool, it basically, because of the growth of Liverpool in the 18th century, and then as a result of the slave trade. So these houses were kind of indirectly built on that wealth. So it's just a historic image of the area, and you can see the original Victorian development. The Industrial Revolution basically meant that Liverpool was once a kind of very dense and active city. But during the 70s and 80s, the area suffered with post-industrial economic decline. As industry globalised, Liverpool's port became less important, factories less needed, there was high unemployment, mistrust of local government, and eventually uprisings against racist police force, and this culminated in the riots of 1981. And so the area of Granby for the local authorities basically became a problematic area, and over the subsequent 20 years, there was successive top-down regeneration schemes that sought to demolish the houses in the area and start again, displacing people and problems. But people in the area consistently fought against these plans, seeing it as a further kind of victimization of the area that the community had already suffered from chronic disinvestment. And this is quite a good drawing. You can see in the 1950s, the area had, as originally built, a thriving high street. So the pink represents retail and blue institutional. And then it was also a kind of, Granby Street was a through road that connected part of the city and had high footfall. But you can see by 2016, as a result of the clearances, just 4 of Granby's 14 streets were left standing. And the terraces were replaced by low-density suburban housing, and the street patterns were really disrupted. They ripped the heart out of the area. And so you can see, you know, the people in the area valued many things that the authority didn't. The buildings, basically, which spoke of a more prosperous era of Liverpool's past and a sense of community, and the symbolic importance of this area as the centre of one of the oldest black populations in Europe. But due to the realities of the inner city decline in the 80s and 90s, the local authority believed that lower density housing was necessary. So you can see from these slides the kind of before and after. There's a few of these. And kind of one of the things that the local authority did to sort of facilitate demolition was to evict people and board up the houses and remove roofs to prevent squatting, basically. And this kind of happened over a few decades. And so then it left, there were kind of streets of houses that were left vacant for years. And and basically became ruins with kind of grass on the floor and no timber left. And then, having been boarded up for so long, people complained about the unsightly appearance of the houses, and so sometimes the boards were replaced with transparent plastic, and then there was a kind of gap between the window and the transparent plastic, which then would get filled with plants. So the whole thing was kind of, and it happened across many areas of Liverpool, subject to the same planning policies. And it was a kind of really tragic and misguided attempt at trying to solve social and economic problems through demolition. But after many decades, there was basically an acknowledgement by the local council that the policy had been a failure. And also, there was a small group of residents that consistently resisted eviction, despite the council kind of completely neglecting the area. So they would stay. They would not only look after their own houses, they would take it upon themselves to maintain other houses too, do general street maintenance, build their own planters. There was a regular market to replace some of the function of the high street that had been destroyed. And they also, after the acknowledgement that the council got it wrong, they organised to resist the destruction. So there's kind of some of these signs put up. And so when we first arrived in the area, this is what it looked like. And it's important to emphasise how much it felt owned by the residents. They basically then formalised themselves into a community land trust called the Granby 4 Street CLT. And it's a model that comes from the USA, and it acknowledges the fact that the route to community empowerment of their area is through direct ownership on behalf of the residents. And so we worked with them to produce a master plan document, which is essentially had a very simple message, which was to say, don't demolish these houses, redo them and keep them. And yeah, focus on retention rather than demolition. So here are the interior of the houses when we found them. And we worked through big models, drawings, pragmatic use of materials, simple structural solutions, with then moments of kind of handmade specialness. It was sort of pragmatism with then a few sort of precious items like door handles, lampshades, fireplaces, transfers on tiles, on bathroom tiles. But it was essentially quite a practical scheme. So you can see it's a bathroom here. Some of the handmade door handles. And this was making fireplaces in one of the houses as it was being redone, using the rubble from the site. So it was all very hands-on, and here they are being produced. And yeah, this is just an overall image of making the fireplaces in the house while it's being made into a kind of a livable space. And from redoing the houses, lots of other projects then sort of started emerging, and then the next phase is to continue to develop some of the special elements that were made for the houses, and use those techniques to have more local jobs, local craft, manufacturing business called Granby Workshop that's kind of rooted in the area and offers employment. And there's now a cafe being proposed that we're working on. There's Granby Winter Garden that's been built in one of the houses that was really not really a house anymore. It was really just walls. So it's now looks like that. And yeah, I think Louis going to talk about Granby Workshop.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, so Granby Workshop, I'm Louis, by the way. Granby Workshop came out of our work in Liverpool, and I think, yeah, like this idea of working in residence is really important to us, not just in terms of working physically, like in a place, being there, using it as our office, but also staying with a project. And we've done that across many projects, and this one in particular, where we stay with a place, we develop projects, kind of more and more things kind of come out of it, whether they be architectural projects or other kinds of projects, and this is one of those other kinds of projects. And it really came out of this idea that, you know, due to this managed decline of the area by the council, you know, there was really high unemployment and people in this idea of like circular economy. It was like there was very little going on there, and people need jobs and kind of dignified employment. And because we had done all of this research and we'd developed all of these products that you just saw through doing the 10 houses, we thought, why not continue to produce those products and set up a new manufacturing business in the area? Obvious thing to do. So that was Granby Workshop, and yeah, we initially set up, and obviously there were all these vacant units along the high street, as you know. So we set up in one of them very simply, you know, with kind of just 2 or 3 people, and we used at the time we won the Turner Prize, and so it was this opportunity to, the Turner Prize is basically just this huge PR kind of circus, and so we wanted to leverage that, you know, for this thing in Granby. So we used that to publicise the workshop. And so actually our Turner Prize exhibition was a showroom for Granby Workshop. So that's kind of what we did. And the idea was that, you know, you would develop not only kind of jobs for people, but develop skills in what those things are. You know, ceramics, for example, the northwest of England used to have this kind of proud heritage of ceramics. Like if you go to Stoke-on-Trent, which is very close to Liverpool, it's known as the potteries. But you know, now all of these big factories are just being turned into museums, and it's very sad. And so that's kind of the context that it came out of. So you can see here there was some experimentation. This is a kind of pressed lampshade that she's making, and there was some kind of experimentation with trying to make ceiling roses using, you know, like cake, what do you call them? The thing, like piping bags that you use for like cakes and things like that. But that didn't end up being a product. Yeah, and then the fireplaces that you saw, we used that to develop lots of terrazzo products out of the rubble from the demolished buildings. So there's a lot of brick in there, things like that. So it's all like kind of polished concrete, lamps and bookends and things like that. The door handles, cupboard door handles that we made, they were actually originally made in a barbecue. So it was this special Japanese method of making ceramics. We kind of developed this woodblock printed fabric, which again, it was just, you know, very simple kind of stuff. The tiles that you see, these cutout tiles, the way that they're made is basically it's like the cheapest tiles that you can buy, like just the cheapest like white bathroom tiles, and then we get this, you can see like on the right, there's this kind of like coloured paper, and you just cut it out with scissors like randomly and kind of put them on the tiles as you see fit. So each one is different, you know. And that's kind of also the idea behind all of the products, is that they kind of display like the way that they're made. Like each one is slightly different, and it kind of shows the hand of the creator, or something like in each unique piece. So then that paper is just placed on the tiles, and then it's refired, and the paper's made of a special ceramic material that then settles into the glaze, and then it becomes like permanently part of the tile. So yeah, this is the Turner Prize exhibition, and which we use to kind of display our wares and sell stuff. And it was also, again, you know, it was an opportunity for us to like further develop products and test things and kind of have a go, because actually a lot of these things never ended up being kind of products that we put to like full production, but we tried doing kind of, you can see these black things are burned timber, basically burned with like a blowtorch. So we did that. We made these like burned timber furniture and stuff. What else we got in there? The lampshades there. That's like the one that she was making in the previous slide. So you can see what they look like. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. So Granby Workshop now is still going. So we set it up in 2015, and it's kind of spun out of Assemble, and it's an employee-owned company. So there are currently, I'm going to say, 7 people. We've moved to a new, larger premises in the area. And it's going well. We're now focusing more on, actually you don't have an image, unfortunately, but we're focusing on basically making architectural tiles, so using coloured ceramics, ceramic that is like coloured through, and then we kind of mix it so that it's kind of goes like swirly and like kind of coloured like that, and then we extrude it like into a long sausage, like the same size as the tile, and then we slice the tiles off it. So like each one is like a little bit different, and they're really nice. Yeah. So granbyworkshop.co.uk for all your projects, architectural projects. Yeah, so that's it really. I think we might have run out of time. I've got another project I could talk about, but what do you want? Do you want questions now, or should I just quick? What do you guys want to do? I'll keep it short. Quick one. Okay. Just yeah, I'll just quickly talk about Baltic Street Adventure Playground, which is a adventure playground and organisation that we set up in Glasgow, which is in Scotland. And the project's purpose, through economical means, was to give children in the area the opportunity to realise that they have an active agency in the world around them. Basically, Glasgow is actually really poor, especially this part of Glasgow, East Glasgow. It has like the lowest life expectancy in Europe, or something like that. So there's a lot of poverty in the area. And all right, this is the project that we set up, Baltic Street Adventure Playground. So it's kind of comes from this idea that often play, things that are built for play are kind of very structured, and don't offer that much in terms of creativity for children. And the context of the area itself, many things were kind of being just demolished like willy-nilly for the Commonwealth Games that was happening in Glasgow. You know, it's one of those things where it was just simply seen as you know, a poor area where you could just do what you like. So kind of these big industrial buildings were demolished to just make way for this enormous coach park that they wanted to put there. And existing kind of play, play provision was really lacking. Especially because obviously children grow up quite quickly, so you kind of, you know, you need to get something done fast. And at this time, we'd also been, when we kind of came across this project, the way that it happened was that it was actually an art project for the Commonwealth Games. So the Commonwealth Games wanted a piece of public art in the area, so presumably they were expecting, I don't know, like a statue of a great Olympian? No, Commonwealth Game athlete or something. Actually, art projects are often how we manage to pull off these kind of crazy projects, because art can kind of be anything. So, like, they can't really say no. But the Adventure Playground movement actually emerged out of the chaos of post-war cities, Second World War. So it was originally these kind of just, you know, children would just play on the bomb sites, basically, and kind of build their own little little dens and things like that. And it's all about the kind of intent for self-direction and the belief that calculated risks are a good thing. And children learn through being allowed the agency to shape space around them. And yeah, so this is kind of like a modern adventure playground called Glamis, which is in London. So there's quite a few in London. I don't know if there's any here in Stockholm. I believe there's some in Germany. So yeah, apparently this is the site, and apparently before we got here, it was informally used as a playground already. And the fact that it was owned by the council kind of made it easy to kind of to turn it into a playground again. And yeah, it was all about, like, it wasn't really about you know, let's design a playground and then like open the gates and like let the children flow in afterwards. It was more like let the children flow in and then kind of, you know, kind of do stuff around them to try to facilitate what they already want to do. And I think this picture, this image really nicely illustrates the fact that children will kind of just play in anything. So you just you just need to kind of facilitate that. And the way that we did that was by doing really simple things like giving them some boots so that their feet don't get wet or that their nice trainers don't get messed up. Just giving them food so that they can eat, you know, like kind of nutritious food. And the actual kind of play equipment ended up just being like, you know, some kind of like supermarket trolleys and like some big like drainage pipes and things like that. And the important part of the job was there was an element of like making it safe, of like putting in an office for the play workers, but it was about setting up this organisation, the infrastructure in its totality. So part of that was also employing the play workers, setting it up as an organisation with trustees who would look after it in the long term. And we were trustees for many years. We would send someone up, and this guy, Rob, he's been one of the play workers who was kind of been involved from the very beginning, and he's still there with his brother Alan, and they live around the corner, and they are, you know, they're kind of the heart and soul of the project, really. So yeah, so that's kind of how it goes on, you know, and it's just about, you know, empowering children to kind of do what they want and, like, you know, play in a way that feels very kind of free, really. So yeah, it kind of like doesn't look like much, but like it's actually really good. Yeah, at the end.
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much. I have to ask Tove before we go on. How long do we have? 10, 15 minutes. You're welcome to ask questions too from the audience. So, when you got the news that you had won the Erskine Prize, did you know of Erskine, first of all?
I didn't know. Never heard of him. Sorry. But Johannes explained everything. I actually took the call. Yeah, I took the call, and Johannes explained everything. Yeah, he said he built the Marylebone flyover that I'm very familiar with.
The what?
The Marylebone flyover. Is that right?
The London Arc.
What?
The Arc.
Oh,
the Arc. Yeah, but that's, yeah, exactly.
That's the Hammers. That's by the Hammersmith
The
flyover.
Hammersmith, yeah.
It's completely different.
With a
The
giraffe
Arc. I
sticking
know
up
the
its
Arc.
head. There.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's GlaxoSmithKline office, isn't it? Yeah.
Could be today.
These days, yeah. Okay.
And now that you
Love
know
the
of him, do you? I mean, now you feel affiliated, of course, to Erskine, but I mean, it's the words you mention on location, very hands-on, always in tune with the residents, having really larger ears than mouths, one could say. They're all kind of trademarks of Erskine, right?
Well, yeah, we were staying near the big library and talking about because we walked past and there's the McDonald's.
Yeah, Stadsbiblioteket here in Stockholm. Yeah.
And we were wondering whether the McDonald's at the front would have been what Erskine would have wanted or not, because it was, you know, it's the people's place to eat, and then you've got the big academic stuff behind. Because there was obviously speculation about whether it should change and whether it's going to turn into something else. And
that's a good.
I know we don't have we weren't sure, but we.
It is not an Erskine building, of course.
The front bit.
No. It's got nothing to do with Erskine, that one. It's all.
But
Gunnar
the
Asplund,
between the two, we were wondering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which Gunnar Asplund actually wanted to be a commercial space.
Yeah.
In all the drawings, it's a commercial space. But yeah. It's I don't think there have been so many worthy winners of this prize over the years, but you're definitely very much in line with what he was thinking of and wanted, I think. So that's really nice, and English as well. So that's cool. You make terrific projects. You are a project in yourselves, in a way, right? Do you regard yourself that way?
I guess the way that we run is as a collective. So I think the way we would describe it is that being a collective and running a business, probably we admit ourselves, isn't the best way to run a business. But in a way, you kind of, it's always developing and always learning new things and always trying our best to try and figure out the best way to do stuff. And in that, learning new ways of communicating with each other, new ways of working with each other. You know, new ways. We're about to move to our Sugarhouse free space, and we're thinking about how do we fit into that, how we're going to bring people. There's all constantly changing and constantly people coming and leaving. So I'd say we're very much a project, but we'll probably never be a finished project, which is nice.
Yeah, it's also because actually most of us have very little professional experience outside of Assemble, so it's kind of which in a way is like a massive problem, but it's also, you know, it's also kind of amazing because we kind of do everything from scratch, and like, you know, as an organisation, like we kind of think through everything, sort of thing.
I'll give you the microphone, Shay, because we don't need it for the audience quite now. But do you find it odd to be in a space like this? I mean, we're in probably the largest architectural office in the country.
No, not really.
Could you imagine working in a space like that?
I have before, so I'm not someone who has only ever been in Assemble. So I am familiar with like more traditional architecture environment. But personally, what drew me to Assemble and to work with the collective is its nature of like a multidisciplinary nature between art and architecture, and what Louis said before about art being an opportunity to basically try and experiment with new ideas. And the fact that not only are you the architect in terms of physical architecture, but also a social architecture of like the idea of forming new businesses and workspaces is for the sustainability of that building to continue in like the long run. So you can design a building, but if the infrastructure, the social infrastructure and the programming of that building isn't well designed, then the building itself probably will then become not in use, then it will fall into disarray, then the council, whoever, will not invest in it anymore. So there's an intention of like, there's a reason why the designing of spaces and the designing of organisations and trustees are something that always happens together in the projects that we're talking about.
And are you saying that that is not the common way of doing it?
No.
No.
No, and also it's not the common way to be self-initiated or be the client and the architect, or be the construction person and the architect as well. It's very normal to just have a client, developer, and an architect, and so like, you know, the classic procurement way.
Have you got that type of assignment as well?
Yeah, like just worth saying, like, yeah, that we do like traditional architecture work. We also have the workspace business that Owen's spoken about. So you know, we do a lot of bread and butter work as well. And these kind of projects, like the ones we've been talking about, they're kind of are the ones that we live for, but they're very difficult and stressful. And you know, you can't have every project like that. You know. You can only kind of do one at a time, you know, like that, I think.
What brings home the bacon?
Yeah, Emily, yeah.
Send out Emily. We need money.
I think it's been different at different times, but yeah, at the moment we have some big architecture work that's kind of doing well, but also the kind of running the workspace means that we have like low costs in terms of like we don't rent an office and stuff like that, which helps.
You have to pay rent, don't you?
Basically, the way that we've done it to date with Sugarhouse has been that they're basically development sites. So, you know, we're just taking advantage really, which is a little bit, you know, not really what we want to be doing, but we're taking advantage of the demolition of industrial space and the replacement with luxury flats, basically, because that's what's happening, and it's very sad, and we don't like it, but at the same time, there is this opportunity where people buy these buildings and they sit on them for a few years while they're developing their big housing project or whatever. So we just move in, and they just don't want it to be squatted. There's also empty buildings in the UK carry higher tax burden, stuff like that. So they actually, even if we paid no rent, they would be saving a lot of money. And these are the types of buildings that like normal tenants, you know, like a normal business, might not want to move into because it's only 5 years, let's say. There's a decent amount of capital to put into it, you know, but we can do it more cheaply because we manage the construction ourselves and things like that. So that's kind of how we've done it. Okay. Yeah. So the rent that we pay is very low.
Is there a CEO? Is that you, Emily?
No,
No?
there isn't. So the way that there's founding partners of Assemble who are like, there's around 15 founding partners, and there's very fluid partners who are kind of in and out of Assemble also. But if you work at Assemble for 2 years, after 2 years you can then become a partner. So the collective is still very much like if you're working for Assemble. There is a different. All partners kind of get to do. That's much different. It's like we collectively meet to vote on large decisions. So if you're a partner, you get to have that voting.
How often do you meet up?
So we
Every
meet
week, or?
So we meet weekly. So this is to Assemble. We kind of dedicate time in our schedule to collective time. So we have half a day every week dedicated to collective time, where we could all meet together, talk about projects. We meet every Monday to have a go around to talk about because it's hard to keep track of everyone. They're all working on different. So we meet and everyone talks about what they're up to, and then we kind of just have a bit of time if we need to like talk about a project. But then every quarter, so every 3 months, we then meet up to have a big meeting about the big decisions, which will kind of roll over quarterly. Yeah.
Emily, what is the best thing about Assemble Studio, and what is the most frustrating thing
I think
about the way you work?
The best thing, I mean, in the work space. Yeah, I was going to say lunch. I was going to say lunch. Yeah. That was so. Obviously, there's a collective culture that we try to also actually just sort of play out day to day. So one thing that we do is that we have quite a strict lunch system, which is probably my favourite thing, where one person makes lunch for everybody each day.
And when we say everybody, we're talking about how many people?
So 10 people.
Okay.
Not everyone's in there all day, but so then it means that basically about every 2 weeks you make a big lunch, and it means that every day you get a really delicious lunch for very cheap. And when you eat lunch, you get a set of points, and when you make lunch, you get your points taken away. So then there's a rota of like, oh, I've got the most points, I need to make lunch this week.
Okay.
That's
the best thing.
So that's the best thing. No, but it's good. It's an illustration of kind of things playing out, large-scale things playing out on a small scale.
Yeah.
And also it means everyone stops and has lunch together, which is really nice. That's a frustrating thing. I mean, I think when COVID hit, it really kind of like pushed the things that we find really important. It made them a lot harder. So having to spend a lot of time on Zoom and people being in different places and not knowing what is going on and everyone being very spread out did make the idea of being a collective very hard. And I think there was a lot of frustration around that. I think, if you guys agree. Well, yeah. So I think we're still actually trying to. Zoom has now become kind of a necessity because people are quite spread out. Yeah. But I think we're trying to actively pull people back together a bit. But I think, that had a big impact. And it's quite messy in our office. But that's part of it, I think.
And the fact that you don't have a CEO, you don't have someone who tells you, this is what we're going to do. Yeah. Because that's just too Norman Foster partnerish for you. Yeah. The fact that you don't have that hierarchy, you have to reach consensus, right? Is that frustrating, or is that Shay? What do you say?
Well, I guess from what my understanding is, because I'm not a partner, is that you need at least 2 people or something to agree on a new project for a project to happen. So it really is about people stepping up and being like, yes, I find this project interesting and I will happily take it forward. And people have different interests within the collective. So, some people may be drawn more to a traditional form of architecture maybe than others, some more an artistic practice. So you kind of collaborate with each other and you bring it to the table and you make it work. I guess I don't think it's that more difficult. I think it just means that people have more autonomy within the collective to pursue ideas and projects that they want to. And there's a welcoming environment for people to say, look, I hear there's a tender for this XYZ project. Who's interested? Who wants to come on board with me? Who wants to manifest an opportunity to make something happen? So I think that's a really big positive of the
So
collective.
there's no one there saying that that's a good idea, Shay, but you're not particularly well suited for that particular assignment. I think Owen should take it on instead.
Well, there's like, kind of getting to the nitty-gritty of it. There's like, so...
That's what's so interesting with you, that the nitty-gritty is just so, so confusing.
So we have, like, people have their strengths and stuff they like to do and don't like to do. So, for example, we do have, like, a management team who's a core people of management who decide, like, resourcing within Assemble. And there's also, like, a comms team and new work. And it's basically people who kind of have an interest in that, but then decide to do that. But then if they want to leave, someone else can come in and do that. It's not like it's like, this is the set team. No. But at certain times, there are people that do take on different roles. For example, me and Louis are housekeeping, so we look after the building, and like, so, there's lots of different like factions within Assemble who are like smaller little subgroups, which are also fluid groups, but then somehow seem to manage the kind of subgroups that they're in as well.
Okay, you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
It's weird because I think the way that I think about it is if you have like a boss, it's just whatever they say goes. Do you know what I mean? And it's like if you have a meeting and you're like, oh yeah, this is what happened to me, and they're like, no, this is what happened. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what happened, yeah. But we don't have that. So every meeting has to be minuted, like, to perfection, because you have to go back and look over the evidence of what happened. And so, although it sounds like kind of chaotic, actually, we like formalize all of this stuff. We have, reams of kind of documents of like how management should happen and who's responsible for what, and, so it's when you work like this, actually, you have to be a lot more formal about things than when you work traditionally, and that's kind of the major inefficiency of it. And also the fact that, when you can't, it's difficult to kind of force people to do things, which is, not so great for making money, but that's kind of the choice that you make, really.
We have a question here.
Yeah, so thank you very much for showing these inspiring projects. Really, really cool stuff. I have a question though. Doing architecture and building stuff is surrounded by so many laws and regulations and stuff. How do you get away with this?
How do you get around the laws and regulations?
I mean, yeah, it can be an issue. Was there a specific law and regulation you're worried about? I mean, was you thinking about the adventure playground?
Just one example. I don't know. In Sweden, we do like laws and regulations. Just looking at this playground, for example. Doing a playground in Sweden is rather complicated because there's so many safety laws and regulations you have to follow. So basically, doing this in Sweden is kind of complicated.
Is it impossible, would you say?
I wouldn't say it's impossible. One way to get away with this here is using the language or the tool of art, calling it an art installation, and suddenly you don't call it a playground, which makes it possible to do stuff like this. Is it the same in England?
Basically, behind the scenes, all this stuff is being dealt with. Like the guy, Robbie, he's managing all of that. There is, it's happening. Yeah, it's there. We're not showing images of it. We're not going like, oh yeah, and here was the regulation that we had to follow. I know that they're very up to date with kind of risk assessment. They do like dynamic risk assessments, and they obviously have like a huge amount of their work is like safeguarding and stuff for the children. So yeah, like it's a thing, and we have to deal with it. And sometimes it's difficult, but it's just not something that we necessarily talk about, I think.
Yeah, I guess in terms of like more the manufacturing, maybe there's still like, obviously like the UK still has a lot of like rules and regulations that we have to follow. It's not the most like easy country to like just build wherever you want. And we still have to do obviously like very thorough like planning applications and sign things off. I guess, like, for example, the kind of more experimental bespoke stuff is that by choosing stuff that maybe isn't structural allows you to do stuff that's more experimental, where you can test the boundaries bigger than maybe like more like insulation new products, which will have to go through thorough testing and manufacturing and get all the codes of like certificates that you need. So I guess it's like really being careful with what areas you're going to test and what you, so that you don't have to go through all the legislation and do all the kind of, go through all the planning and risk assessments that would be more complicated.
But yeah, also I think sometimes, you know, we do just break the rules. I mean, if you know, it's easy enough to do so. Do you know what I mean? Like at Princelet Street, that Shay was talking about, for example, you know, technically speaking, it's still classified as a house. So it should be used only for residential purposes. We happen to know that that is very weakly, if not enforced at all in the UK. And possibly like very difficult for them to even enforce. So yeah, you just decide, well, we're just going to ignore it.
There's a little loophole there. We'll sneak through it. Huh. One final question. We've run out of time, unfortunately. The name, Assemble, where does it come from?
A very long and arduous discussion. Yeah, you know, it's just assemble. It's like a collective. You assemble a building. It's not that deep, really.
Thank you very, very much.